The morning was quiet at the gas station, the kind of stillness you only get in the early hours before the world fully wakes up. As the fluorescent lights flickered overhead, the air was thick with the smell of fresh coffee and motor oil. Mike the cashier was mindlessly wiping down the counter when the bell above the door jingled. He barely looked up, assuming it was just another early bird stopping for a fill-up before work. But then he saw him, a man in his mid-40s, disheveled, his clothes old and worn, with a heavy bulging bag clutched tightly in one hand. The man's face was pale, his eyes dark beneath the hood of his jacket. He shuffled to the counter and dropped the bag with a thud, causing Mike to glance up, intrigued by the odd behavior. "I'll take $20 on pump 3, the man muttered, his voice flat, almost rehearsed. Mike nodded and turned to ring up the order. But when the man pulled out a small canvas pouch and opened it, Mike's brow furrowed. Inside were dozens of quarters, old battered quarters, that looked like they'd been through more than just a few pockets. The man began unloading them onto the counter without a word, as though this was perfectly normal. Sir, are you sure you want to pay with these?" Mike asked, his voice unsure. The man nodded, barely looking up. "This is all I have," he replied, his voice distant. He didn't seem to care about the confusion he was causing. Mike hesitated for a moment, then slowly began counting the quarters. Each one clinked as it hit the counter, echoing through the stillness of the station. There was something unsettling about the whole thing, but Mike couldn't quite put his finger on it. The man's expression remained neutral, almost like he was in a trance, completely detached from the world around him. The more Mike counted, the more he felt the weight of the situation. It wasn't just the odd way the man was paying, it was something deeper, something hidden beneath the surface. As the final quarter hit the counter, Mike's unease grew. This wasn't just a random encounter. This moment, felt like the start of something much bigger than a simple gas station transaction. Something was about to change. Mike couldn't shake the feeling that something was off as he continued to count the quarters. There was an unsettling rhythm to it, the soft clink of metal on metal, the steady stream of coins filling the counter one after another. He glanced up at the man who was still standing there, with that distant, almost vacant look in his eyes, staring at nothing in particular. His fingers twitched nervously, tapping the edge of the counter in a way that Mike couldn't ignore. There were so many quarters. It wasn't just the sheer number of them, it was the age of the coins. Each one looked worn, the edges frayed, and the designs barely visible, like they had traveled a long way before, ending up here. They didn't look like the quarters you'd find in a typical pocket change jar. No. These looked like they had been through something, maybe years of being passed from hand to hand, hidden in dark corners, or buried deep in forgotten pockets. Mike finished counting the quarters $20 worth, and pushed them aside, feeling a strange weight settle in the pit of his stomach. As he prepared to hand the man his change, he noticed the canvas pouch, the same one the man had pulled the coins from. It was old, tattered, and looked like it had seen better days. There was something about the way the pouch was folded, like it was hiding something. "Can I get you anything else?" Mike asked, his voice more cautious now. The man didn't respond immediately. Instead, he just stood there, eyes fixed on the counter. Finally, after what felt like an eternity, he murmured, "That's all?" His voice was flat, almost emotionless. It was as if he was stuck in some sort of trance, detached from reality. Mike glanced at the bag again, and for a split second his gaze caught something odd. There was a small, shiny object inside, barely visible. It was just a glint of metal too small to identify at a distance, but it was enough to stir something in Mike's gut. His mind raced. Was it just more change or something else? The man slowly reached for the bag, his fingers brushing against the counter as he gathered it up. Mike hesitated for a moment, then asked, "Are you sure everything's all right?" The man didn't answer, simply turning toward the door, but before he left, he paused. Without looking back, he muttered, "They're looking for me." Mike stood frozen. The words hung in the air like a warning, but the man was already gone. Slipping out the door and into the fading morning light, Mike watched him go, his heart racing. The whole encounter felt wrong, like he'd just witnessed a moment in time that was far bigger than he could understand. Then a strange thought crossed his mind. Who carries around so many quarters, and why did the man say they were looking for him? Mike glanced at the clock above the counter. It had only been a few minutes since the man left, but the time seemed to stretch endlessly. The air in the gas station felt thick, as if the entire room was holding its breath. Mike wiped his hands on the sides of his apron, trying to shake off the unease that had settled in the pit of his stomach. He had seen all sorts of weird customers in his years working here, but there was something about this guy that just didn't sit right. He tried to focus on the usual routine, stocking the shelves, wiping down the counters, checking the pumps, but his thoughts kept drifting back to the encounter. The quarters. The way the man hadn't even seemed fazed when Mike had told him the coins weren't ideal for payment. Mike had never seen anything like it before, a full roll of quarters worn down to nearly nothing, exchanged without a second thought. It was unsettling how calm the man had been, especially given the awkwardness of the transaction. And the way he'd left so quietly without another word. Mike's thoughts kept spiraling as he leaned against the counter, his eyes darting to the door every few seconds. Was it his imagination, or did it feel like something was coming? Something big. He tried to tell himself that he was just being paranoid, but the feeling wouldn't go away. The air outside seemed still too, almost as if the world was holding its breath along with him. It was only a matter of time, Mike realized, before something would break the silence. His mind raced with thoughts of what it could be. Maybe the man was just a stranger in a hurry, or maybe there was something more to him than he had let on. Mike had seen enough to know that people often weren't what they seemed, but this felt different. He could feel the tension in his shoulders, the weight of the unknown pressing in on him. The store felt quieter than usual. The soft hum of the refrigerator and the occasional rattle of a passing car outside, the only sounds breaking the silence. Mike glanced at the clock again. Only 15 minutes had passed. He forced himself to look away, shaking his head. There was no reason to keep thinking about it. The man was gone. It was just another weird customer encounter, a moment that would soon fade away. But as Mike straightened up, a sudden noise from outside grabbed his attention. Something loud, something that didn't belong. His heart skipped a beat as he heard the faint whirring sound growing closer. Mike rushed to the window, his pulse quickening. The noise was unmistakable now. A helicopter. Mike's heart pounded in his chest as the sound of the helicopter grew louder, now unmistakably close. His mind raced, trying to process what was happening. Was this some sort of prank? Maybe a news crew coming for a story? No, this wasn't just any helicopter. This was something more, something that made the hairs on the back of his neck stand up. The helicopter hovered just above the parking lot, its blades whirling in a deafening crescendo. Mike's breath caught in his throat as he stumbled backward from the window, his mind still struggling to make sense of the situation. Was it really here for him? For the strange man with the quarters? The moment seemed to freeze as the helicopter began its slow descent, casting a shadow over the entire lot. Mike could see the crew inside, now their dark uniforms stark against the bright sunlight. He felt a chill run down his spine. Whoever they weren't just here for a routine check. This was no random visit. The urgency in the air, the intensity of the descent. It all pointed to something serious. Outside, the helicopter finally touched down on the tarmac, with a heavy thud sending a gust of wind sweeping through the parking lot, rattling the small station. Mike felt the ground vibrate beneath his feet as he rushed to the door, half expecting someone to rush in. But no one came. Instead, he heard the low hum of the helicopter's engines powering down, followed by the sharp, quick footsteps of men in black suits. His pulse quickened. They were coming. Mike quickly darted behind the counter, trying to stay out of sight. His thoughts were a whirlwind now. Was this part of some military operation? A police raid? A secretive government mission? And what did this have to do with the man who had tried to pay with quarters? The door to the station opened with a loud chime, and the men entered. Their expressions were unreadable, but their movements were precise, efficient. They were professionals. Mike's throat tightened as the men fanned out across the store, each one moving with purpose. There was no time for small talk, no questions. They were here for something or someone. He caught a glimpse of one of them, tall, sharp-eyed, and moving with military precision. His gut twisted. This wasn't just a random arrival. They were on a mission, and it had everything to do with the man who had walked into his store just minutes earlier. Mike swallowed hard. The quiet gas station had suddenly become ground zero for something he couldn't yet understand. The questions swirled in his mind. Who was that man? What was he involved in? And why had they come for him? The sound of a voice low and commanding broke through his thoughts. We need to talk to the cashier. Now? The tension in the air was palpable as the men in black suits spread out in the gas station. Mike watched from behind the counter, his heart racing. He hadn't heard anyone speak directly to him yet, but he knew this wasn't a coincidence. The helicopter, the men in black, the strange transaction with the quarters. It was all connected, and he had a sinking feeling that he was about to be pulled into something far bigger than he could have imagined. Then, just as quickly as the men had entered one of them, tall, dark-haired, and carrying himself with the kind of authority Mike recognized from military movies, walked over to the counter. He didn't speak at first, just scanned the room like he was piecing together a puzzle. Mike's breath hitched. Was this man here for him? Was he the reason everything had turned so strange? Without warning, the man spoke, his voice calm but firm, as if he were already aware of everything that had transpired. "We need to talk about the man who tried to pay with quarters." He said, his eyes locking onto Mike's. His tone was businesslike, but there was an edge to it that made Mike's blood run cold. Mike's mind raced. He didn't know who these people were or what they wanted, but it was clear that the man with the quarters was far more than a simple confused customer. There was a deeper connection here, a connection Mike couldn't yet grasp. The tall man motioned for the others to follow him. They gathered near the back of the station, out of Mike's view, and began whispering urgently. The words were too faint to make out, but Mike could hear the occasional sharp tone and the hushed intensity. His curiosity got the better of him, and he stepped cautiously out from behind the counter, moving closer to the back room. He had to know more. Suddenly, the man who had been speaking earlier turned back to him. His face was stone cold now, devoid of any emotion, like a switch had been flipped. He took a deep breath before speaking again, this time with a more direct tone. "We know about the quarters," he said, "and we know about him. The man who tried to pay with them, his name is Stephen Hayes." Mike blinked, confused. He'd never heard that name before, but it wasn't the name that made his stomach drop. It was the way the man said it, as if it were a name everyone should recognize. "You don't understand." The agent continued, his eyes narrowing. "Hayes was part of a special covert operation years ago, one that was supposed to be buried in the past. It's not something you should be involved in." Mike's mind was reeling. This wasn't just about a man trying to pay for gas with quarters. It wasn't just about a random helicopter landing in a small parking lot. There was history here. There was a mission buried deep under layers of secrecy, and the man who had entered his gas station was somehow tied to it. Mike had unwittingly stumbled into something that reached far beyond the walls of the convenience store. "He's in hiding now?" The agent continued, his voice low. "We've been tracking him for years. And if you don't want to get involved in something you can't walk away from, I suggest you stay out of our way." The implications of the agent's words hit Mike like a punch to the gut. This was bigger than he ever imagined. This man, Stephen Hayes, wasn't just a regular guy. He was someone who had been involved in something dangerous, something the government wanted to keep under wraps. Mike's eyes widened, the weight of the situation sinking in. Suddenly, it all clicked into place. The quarters. The odd behavior. The helicopter. This was about more than a simple payment gone wrong. It was about a man whose past was filled with secrets and danger, and Mike had just become a part of it. The agent didn't wait for Mike's response. Instead, he gestured toward the door with a sharp movement. "Come with me," he ordered. Mike hesitated for a moment, his mind spinning. But as he saw the other agents begin to approach, his decision was made for him. He wasn't going to have a choice in this. Whatever was happening, he was already in too deep. He stepped forward, the sound of his footsteps echoing in the silence. The agent gave a brief nod, and they exited the store together, the cold afternoon air biting at Mike's skin as they made their way toward the waiting vehicle outside. But in his mind, all Mike could focus on was one question. What had he just become a part of? The agent's words hit Mike like a freight train. Operation Shadow Vault. He had never heard the name before, but the way the agent said it, like it was something dangerous, something no one should have known about, sent a chill down his spine. As the agent's sharp gaze bore into him, Mike found himself questioning everything. How did Stephen Hayes fit into all this? Why had he tried to pay with quarters, and what connection did that strange payment have to this covert operation? It didn't make sense, but the more the agent spoke, the clearer it became that Hayes was no ordinary man. Operation Shadow Vault was a secret government initiative. The agent began, his voice cold and emotionless. Launched nearly 20 years ago, it was designed to infiltrate and dismantle global criminal networks. But it wasn't your average Black Ops mission. It was deeper, more intricate, intended to build trust within these organizations, get close, and then destroy them from the inside out. Mike was already beginning to understand why this was so serious. The government had sent in its best operatives infiltrating the most dangerous groups on the planet, and Hayes, it seemed, had been one of those operatives. Hayes was recruited because of his ability to blend in. The agent continued. He was perfect for the role, smart, charismatic, and a master at deception. He could become anyone, anywhere. For years, he worked as a deep cover agent, building relationships with the most dangerous criminals across the world. But there's a twist. Hayes wasn't just playing a role. He became part of these groups, rising through their ranks, gaining their trust. It was his skill and his ability to disappear that made him invaluable. Mike's mind raced, trying to piece together what he was hearing. Hayes wasn't just a regular agent. He had gone so deep undercover that he had become part of the very criminal organizations he was supposed to bring down. That made him dangerous, unpredictable, but it also made him a target. As the years went on, Hayes uncovered secrets that could bring entire governments to their knees. The agent said, pausing for effect. He got access to private vaults, offshore accounts, and even military-grade technology. That's when things went sideways. There was a breach in the operation, a leak that compromised everything. Some people in the agency believed the Hayes had gone rogue. Others thought he was playing both sides. Either way, the fallout was catastrophic. Mike could feel the weight of the agent's words. Hayes had been more than just an undercover agent. He had uncovered a massive web of corruption and criminal activity that threatened to unravel everything. The secrets he knew, the people he had worked with, and the information he had gained were too valuable to just be left lying around. That's when Operation Shadow Vault was shut down. But Hayes by then had disappeared. Most of the team was wiped out, but Hayes vanished into thin air. The agent continued. We thought he was dead, or that he had gone off the grid for good, but now we know he's been hiding in plain sight all along, and you, Mike, are part of the reason we're here. Mike's mind was spinning. The man who had paid with quarters was no ordinary person. He was part of a covert government operation that had been buried in the shadows for years, and now it seemed Mike was caught in the middle of it all. The agent's eyes softened just a fraction, as if he was about to say something important. Hayes knew too much, and whatever he's hiding now, whatever he's trying to protect, is something we can't afford to let slip through our fingers. Mike felt a surge of panic. This wasn't just about a strange man trying to pay for gas. This was about a decades-long operation, a man who had lived in the shadows for years, and secrets that could bring the entire system crashing down. He had no idea how deep this went, or how much danger he was in, but he knew one thing for sure. He wasn't walking away from this without knowing everything. The agent stared at him as if reading his thoughts and then nodded. We need to find Hayes, and we need to do it fast. If we don't, the world could change forever. The dust settled in the parking lot as the helicopter disappeared into the horizon. Mike stood there, still processing everything that had just happened. The quarters, the strange man, the helicopter, landing like a scene from a spy movie, none of it seemed real. Yet everything about the situation was undeniable. His life had just changed in ways he couldn't yet understand. The police had arrived shortly after the helicopter left. Officers swarmed the area, their radios crackling with updates and orders. They didn't speak to Mike directly, but he could hear their hushed conversations trying to make sense of the chaos. To them, it was just another odd occurrence in a quiet town, but Mike knew better. This was bigger, much bigger. As he sat in the corner of the gas station's small office, he replayed the events over and over in his mind. The man who tried to pay with quarters. What did it all mean? Who was he really, and what was he running from? It was clear that the authorities were far more concerned with the man's identity than the quarters he had tried to pay with. But why? And why had they come for him so fast? Mike's thoughts were interrupted by the agent who had been speaking to him earlier. The agent walked in his face, impassive, but there was something in his eyes, an urgency, a worry that Mike hadn't seen before. We need to go. The agent said, his voice low but firm. You're in danger now. They'll come for you too if they think you know something. Mike's heart raced. He hadn't done anything. He was just a guy trying to buy gas, but now it seemed he was tangled up in something much larger. The agent didn't explain much further, just motioned for Mike to follow him out to the car. As they drove away, Mike glanced back at the gas station. The entire scene felt surreal, like something straight out of a movie. But this wasn't fiction. This was his life now, hours later in a secure location. Mike sat down, still trying to process everything. The agent had been right. He was in danger. The government was involved, and there were people out there who would do anything to protect their secrets. But now he was part of something far larger than he could have imagined. The helicopter wasn't just a random event. It was the first sign that Mike was caught in the crossfire of a covert operation, one that he had no way of understanding, but was now deeply entwined in. He could feel the weight of the situation sinking in. There was no going back. The game had changed, and Mike was now playing for keeps. As Mike sat alone in the dimly lit room, the weight of the past pressed down on him. The agent who had been guiding him through the complexities of the situation finally revealed the full scope of the mystery. The man who tried to pay with quarters was no ordinary civilian. His name, which had once been classified, was now at the center of a covert operation that stretched back decades. Mike listened as the agent explained the legacy of the operative, an unsung hero whose work had kept the nation safe from threats that most would never even know existed. The man, whose real name was David Sullivan, had been a part of a secret government program known as Operation Shadow Vault. His assignments had taken him to the farthest reaches of the world, gathering intelligence, neutralizing threats, and safeguarding the country from its most dangerous enemies. But something had gone wrong. Sullivan had disappeared without a trace, his existence erased from all records as if he had never existed at all. It wasn't until that fateful day in the parking lot that anyone had heard of him again. The helicopter's sudden arrival wasn't a random event. It was a response to the resurfacing of Sullivan, someone the government had assumed was lost forever. Mike couldn't believe what he was hearing. The man he had casually interacted with in the gas station was not just a stranger. He was a piece of history, someone who had lived in the shadows to protect the very world Mike had taken for granted. Now Sullivan's forgotten legacy was drawing Mike into a web of intrigue, danger, and secrets that would change his life forever.